Okay, how's that sound? Okay. 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 Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the December 2022 Mayor's Update. Excuse me, we have a slight change in format today because usually what I like to do is have a couple of guests or maybe a guest and talk about something going on in the community that's of interest. And today, the guests that we had scheduled were not able to make it, and we're going to reschedule them for January. So usually what I try to do every month is give the community a sense of what's gone on in the past month and what we have to look forward to. And so another change that I'm going to make today is I want to look back on the year 2022 and just reflect on what we have done as a city and a little bit about where we might be going as well. But first, I'd like to start off with some thanks to the council, to the city staff, to department heads for the jobs that they do, and jobs well done. And they do so much to move our community forward, and I think they deserve that bit of thanks. And speaking of department heads, we had some changes in 2022 I'd like to make note of. We have a new library director, Sarah Beth Red Wing Foxen, planning director, Adam Severson, parks director, Bob Fullhart. They are all off to a great start. They're doing a great job, doing great service for our community, and I want to also thank their predecessors for their service to the community as well. I also want to offer special thanks, and I know I've done this previously, to longtime city clerk Teresa Reardon, who retired in August. And Mary Beth Breininger has taken on Teresa's responsibilities here in City Hall, and she's off to a great start too. But I just want to recognize Teresa's long service for the city of Spencer. And as I understand it, she's enjoying her retirement and her grandkids. So it's all good. Anyway, what I'd like to do now, I've looked at all of the things that have gone on in the city over the past year. And I came up with 3 categories of things I'd like to talk about today, and plus a short rundown of where the city is on the goals that we set back in February. So the three categories I want to talk about today are projects, issues, and events, in no particular order, but we are going to start with projects. And these are city projects that were done during the past year or are in stages of being done. The first one I'd like to mention is the 25th Street Sewer Project, Hagedorn Heights area. Now, sewer projects are not real sexy projects, but they are vital to any community. And this particular project, the 25th Street project, was initiated by the residents in the area who are not connected with city sewer and have septic systems and so forth. They initiated it. It was probably a year ago, maybe November, that they may have started talking about it, and I'm sure they'd been talking about it well before then. But after a lot of conversation and discussion, the city went forward with that project, put the bids out. We got some good bids for that project, and it started in October of this year. Now, if we had had a construction season like we had last year, that sewer project might be nearing completion right now. However, as we all know, December 2022 has not been very good. They've had to stop construction on that project, and they have a finalized date in the spring sometime. I think it's sometime in May, but they will be finished this spring. So I think that's going to be a great benefit to the folks out on that end of town. St. Luke's Drive overlay project, I don't know if any of you have had occasion to go up to the Highlands or St. Luke's or Riverview Terrace, but that street was badly neglected for a long time. There were some potholes in that street that were pretty bad, and that project is finished, and the street looks great and really drives well right now. Thirdly, the East Leach boat ramp down on the Little Sioux and West Leach Park, excuse me. And that particular boat ramp had been in the works for quite a while. It was finished, got off to a slow start this summer when the water was high. It's hard to believe that it was high at the early part of the summer, as low as it was for the most part of the summer going through the drought. But they got that project done, and it not only looks great, but it has been used to a great extent. You see folks out there fishing off of that ramp. I'm not sure that was the express purpose of it, but they're out there enjoying the river. But it has been great for the kayakers and the canoers who have been able to use it. So I think it's a great asset, and I look forward to expanding the river trail itself from probably even north of Stollies, and maybe we can even extend that down to the south somewhat as well. Another project that's taking place in Spencer, and that we worked on this year, and it's not necessarily a city project, it's actually a Spencer Municipal Hospital project. And Spencer Hospital, of course, is a regional healthcare hub for our community. What a great asset that hospital is for our community. This is a multi-million-dollar project that Spencer Hospital is putting forward to improve the emergency room facility. And the city's part in this project was that the hospital came to us and they asked us that if we would close 11th Street because that is where they wanted to construct the new emergency room department. It caused a lot of consternation, a lot of conversation was held with regard to that closure, but I think in the interest of expanding the hospital, modernizing the hospital, and it is something that we as a community have to be very proud of. And we have to look, I think, not only at what is coming down the pike next year and the year after that, but we have to look at this hospital as being a community resource, a Spencer resource for the next 40 years, 50 years, 100 years, and we have to be able to modernize our facilities. So after a lot of discussion, the city did decide that the street could be closed and they could move forward with that particular project. And then one other project that I'd like to make mention of, and I don't know if this got a lot of attention or not, but that's the trail system. Now, our trail system is one of the best for a community our size. We have, I don't know, I can't remember how many miles of trails, but some of it is getting to be quite old and in need of repair. So the city does set a little bit of money aside every year for trail repair, but there were significant portions of the trail that really were in need of immediate repair. So Bob Rose and Mike Harleman are to be commended for going out and raising funds within the community to repair our trail system. And they did yeoman's work in terms of raising money, and we have lots of the trails repaired, especially around Stolly Park, and I think we're going to be moving into that West Leach Park area next year as well. So again, that's a project that's ongoing, and my thanks to them. Now I'd like to turn our attention now to issues that the city has dealt with during the past year. Now, issues are ongoing. There's a continuum of working through issues. They require a lot of committee meetings, it seems like, a lot of department head time, a lot of city staff time to work on any one of these issues. And it takes time to resolve issues. And you can't get things done without doing a lot of research on an issue and doing your due diligence and partnering with people to come to some sort of agreement that parties can live with. And sometimes you can't. The first one that really came up this year, and it may not seem like a big deal, but that's food trucks. Food trucks becoming more and more prevalent, not only in Spencer, but all over the country. It seems like when you go to a community event, you're going to see food trucks there. People kind of expect it, that they're going to see them. So with that prevalence, and in looking at what our regulations were, we were pretty lax with our regulations with regard to food trucks. Planning and zoning and our planning department did a great job in looking at other communities and what they had with regard to regulations for food trucks. We brought in the food truck operators in the area, got their input so that we didn't want them to think that we were just stepping all over them. We wanted to collaborate with them for something that would work. And so basically, I'm not going to go through the entire ordinance, but we made some minor regulations, and also there's a small fee to operate food trucks within the community. I think it'll be a good thing, not only for the operators, but I think for the community as well. Another issue that was proposed that didn't have quite as good an outcome, perhaps, as the food trucks, and that's urban chickens. The urban chickens ordinance was proposed. We had talked about that several years ago. It never came out of planning and zoning, but the Planning and Zoning Commission this year did a great deal of work on this particular issue. They explored what other ordinances in other communities were, how they worked, what the concerns were, etc. And the end result for the Planning and Zoning Commission was that they sent up a proposed ordinance to the City Council. There was a lot of input, both from those who were in favor of the ordinance and for those who were opposed to the ordinance. Ultimately, the ordinance was defeated, but I want to give a lot of credit to Planning and Zoning for the work that they did. I hope that they don't think that it was all for naught, because they perform a very vital function to our community in their work. Another issue, and this is, again, not necessarily a city issue, but it's an issue that occurred within the city, and that was the senior center. Early last year, the senior center, the board, decided that financially they couldn't make the board, or they couldn't make the center run anymore. And so after a lot of meetings, a lot of conversation and so forth, there was a changeover in the board. And I think that they've come to some good resolution with regard to that particular issue, and they're trying very hard to make changes and keep the senior center open now. And it's been rebranded as Occasions, and I think that the changes that they've made there will be good, and hopefully they'll be there for a long time, because they do provide a vital resource for many residents in our community. Another issue, and this is a pretty major issue, and it took a lot of staff time, took a lot of the council time, and that's the Highway 71-18 intersection issue. Last March, the DOT came to the council and to the supervisors, separate meetings, and they talked about the intersection at Highway 71 and 18, talked about how dangerous it was, and they proposed some improvements that they could make. And there were, as I recall, 5 or 6 different things that they could do to that particular intersection. Well, obviously, the city's concern with that intersection is safety number one. But we're also interested in developing that particular area on Highway 71, that Highway 71 access, economically as well. We think that that is an untapped resource, and I'll focus more on that a little later. But so those are the two big concerns that we had. So in April, after the DOT had met with the council and the supervisors individually, we had a meeting with the supervisors, and we just basically talked about our concerns with what the DOT had talked to both of us about. And so the outcome of that particular meeting in April was that Barry Anderson, who's the chair of the Clay County Supervisors, and myself drafted a letter to the DOT expressing our concerns and looking at perhaps other possibilities that, in our opinions, and of course we're not traffic engineers, we have no idea what works and what doesn't work. They're the experts in the area. They responded with a very detailed letter to us in June. That our letter and the response is on the city website, and I believe that Barry said that the supervisors were going to have it on their website as well. Okay, so nothing much happens in July and in August, and then in September, the DOT came back to the city, came back to the County Board of Supervisors, and basically said, folks, you have to do something up there. And it's a dangerous intersection, and here are two options, basically. Is an R cut, and I'm not going to go into exactly what an R cut is, but it's like giant U-turns, basically. Or a traffic circle or roundabout. And so we talked it over. We were not thrilled, to be quite honest, with either one, but they said that the status quo basically was not an option. So in November, the council and the supervisors met to talk about the roundabout option. Now, we also have to, not only is the DOT suggesting that this is the safest option that we can put forward, but also our county law enforcement, our Spencer Police Department is in favor of this. The county engineer is in favor of it. The Public Works Department at the city is in favor of this as well. So after much consideration, it was decided at a joint council and supervisors meeting in November that a letter be drafted to give our support for the traffic circle or roundabout. So the traffic circle will probably be in the DOT's 5-year plan. That doesn't mean that anything's going to happen up there immediately, because we still have concerns. Our concerns, number one, are safety. They say that that is the safest option that we can possibly have. But we're also concerned about economic development. And we know that many people will say, well, what about Quickstar? Are they going to back out as a result of if there's a roundabout up there? And their conversations, Quickstar's conversations with the city, Quickstar's conversations with the DOT did not indicate that. So I think we're on solid ground there. We just want to make sure that we have access to Highway 71 property. We do not want to negate that at all. Now, all of that said, the DOT did tell us that, you know, if they go ahead with this, and they can, it'll be on their 5-year plan, but if they go ahead with it, they will conduct public meetings, they will conduct meetings, educational presentations, and that sort of thing. So I think there'll be more to come on this issue, but that is an issue that has taken an awful lot of time. Another ongoing issue that is a concern to many people, especially on the west side of town in the West Industrial Park, is the odor issue coming from the Simrise company out there. And you know, we certainly, as a city, the city certainly understand the frustration of the neighbors out there, and everybody who's affected by the odor, whether it's the neighbors in the Western Industrial Park or whether it's people utilizing Stollies. And we know that we have tried to work with Simrise to get a handle on this and get rid of the odor situation. They've submitted a plan. We have forwarded that plan now to our engineering consultants at McClure Engineering to get their opinion of the plan. And we met in closed session as a council 2 weeks ago to discuss our options. So, as I've said, this is an ongoing issue, and in my opinion, it needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. But, as I've also said, issues take a long time sometimes to get resolved, unfortunately. Okay, another issue that we dealt with last spring, and we will be continuing to deal with over the next 5 to 10 years, is the emerald ash borer. It was discovered in Clay County last March. Some experts came up to Clay County. Yeah, we've got it all over Spencer as well. But I must say this, that the city has been proactive with regard to the emerald ash borer situation, and I have to give a lot of credit to Mayor Pro Tem Bill Orison. I would say maybe, 6 to 8 years ago, when the emerald ash borer problem was beginning to move westward in Iowa, Councilman Orison had the foresight to put together and have the city put together a plan to put away dollars so that when the emerald ash borer did hit Clay County and Spencer, that the city was going to be prepared. So last spring, the Park Department was charged with developing a plan to inform the public and deal with the 2,000 plus trees that the city has in the right-of-way, at the cemetery, at the golf course, in the parks, etc., all over the city. And so the plan has been put into effect. It was started to be implemented late last summer and this fall, and it is going to be an ongoing issue, as I said, for several years. But we do have a handle on it so far. So, and if people have questions about it, I'm sure that Park Director Bob Fullhart has a good grasp on this. He's an arborist anyway, so he will be able to steer you in the right direction. Another issue last summer that the city dealt with, and again, we are still dealing with, and that is the trailer court on 18th Street. It was in May and June of last year that the city and SMU found several health and safety violations at the trailer court. And I'm not going to rehash every step of the way here, but the power to the trailer court was turned off. It was deemed by the city that it was enough of a safety and health concern that it needed to be turned off. That said, I was very proud of the city's work in coordinating and collaborating with our nonprofits, the social service organizations here in Spencer, the Spencer Ministerial Association, who really tried to work with the residents of the trailer court to find alternate housing in the middle of July. And our primary concern as a city was the health and the safety of the residents of the trailer court. Now, we're continuing to work with the owner of the trailer court on this issue. Power is being restored on a trailer-by-trailer basis at this time. So, as I said, this is ongoing. We hope to have the situation rectified sooner than later, but again, it takes time. Another issue, and this is kind of a fun one, I hope, and that is we're working on a collaborative project with Spencer Schools. The Fairview tennis courts, they are old. They are beyond being able to be just resurfaced with a blacktop kind of resurfacing. I'm not sure how anybody could play tennis on those courts. I'm not a tennis player, but I've looked at those, and if I were, I don't think that it could help your game whatsoever. At any rate, Spencer Schools and the city are collaborating to build new tennis courts with, and hopefully we're going to have tennis courts made out of what is called post-tension concrete. And they are supposed to require much less maintenance and to have a longer lifespan, a much longer lifespan actually. Now, up front they cost more, but over a period of decades, the maintenance will be much less. So you're going to get more bang for your buck by going with the post-tension concrete, according to the experts. So the proposal is right now to move those tennis courts, not even to just tear them up at Fairview and just rebuild them there, but to move them to an area by the Spencer Middle School. Now, even though they would be on school property, they would still be public tennis courts, and the community could use them. And they could use them for tennis, and they could use them for pickleball. And pickleball has become a very, very, I don't know, widespread activity for a lot of folks these days. So looking at the middle school, it would access their PE program. It would accentuate the tennis program, but also it would allow the public, the Spencer public, to have some really nice tennis courts and pickleball courts to use as well. It also opens up the possibility of utilizing Fairview as a location for a potential splash pad. Now, that's been an ongoing kind of goal that the city has had, along with the improving the swimming pool and the campground and so forth. There's been a lot of talk about where to locate a splash pad. North School Park. It's a very attractive park. You'd have to put in a parking infrastructure, tear out trails, etc. there. At Fairview Park, not the case if you could put it where the tennis courts are. The school has said that they would allow community members to utilize their parking lot in the summer because it's not much utilized. And there's also off-street parking already there with regard to the tennis courts. So that's a possibility, and we don't know if that's what we're going to move ahead with, but I just want to put it out there that that's certainly a possibility, and I think it would be a great destination and a great facility for kids and parents and grandparents in our community. Okay, moving on to events over the past year. First of all, I want to mention the event that was held in April of last year, the first annual Mayor's Community Cleanup. And I kind of initiated this around Earth Day last year, and it was amazing to me the response, the positive response that we had from throughout the community. We had schools and service organizations, businesses, churches, community groups, all participating in cleaning up public areas throughout the community. And it was a great success, and I look forward to initiating the second annual cleanup next spring, probably in April. In March, the city hosted, actually the police department and the Clay County Sheriff's Department in a collaborative effort, hosted the K-9 conference, regional conference trials. We had 90 to 100 police officers and deputies in town with their K-9s, and they would run them through trials, and this was a competition. And it was great for the community. It was probably the safest community in Iowa those few days that the police officers were here. It was an outstanding event. And Spencer's own Pat Westfall and Clay County Deputy Sheriff Tyler Heck and their dogs placed numbers 1 and 2 in that competition. And real proud of them, and real proud of them for hosting just a tremendous event for the community. In May, the Historic Preservation Commission hosted their lecture series, and this has become kind of a tradition that they have had, and I think that they do great work in preserving the history of our community. And last year they looked at the Clay County Fair, the Spencer Fire, the history of the Tangney Hotel, and the Spencer Golf and Country Club, and then the Sanborn maps as well. Kirby Schmidt came in and talked about that, I believe. And just some real interesting topics, and I know that they are in the process right now of planning that lecture series for this coming May, and I'm sure that it will be very informative and very interesting, and I would urge the community to go out and see those. The attendance is usually pretty good, and they're very, very informative. Fourth, and this really isn't an event, but we've had several new businesses come into the community over the past year, and I suppose that one would say that the highlight was in November when TJ Maxx appeared on the south side of town and filled up their parking lot on a regular basis. And I'd like to give credit to our economic development partners that the city partners with almost on a daily basis, and they work so hard to push economic development in Spencer, and that would be Sharifa Jones, and who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and her team out there. They do awesome work. Nancy Nave and her team of one for Spencer Main Street, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Main Street here in a minute, but she does great work. And then Shannon Landauer for the Lakes Area Corridor. And sometimes they don't get the credit that they deserve, but they're always working behind the scenes for economic development in our community. Now, speaking of Main Street, in October, Spencer and Main Street Director Nancy Nave hosted the Iowa Fall Conference. And I was honored to give the welcome to approximately 100 Main Street directors from all over the state of Iowa. And it was a great event. They had a lot of workshops, but they also had a lot of time to explore our community. And so I went with a group of them on a tour of downtown Spencer on the last day. And to a person, they had just wonderful things to say about our community. And I think that should make all of us proud to be Spencerians. And I think it's also important to note that we really can't take Main Street Spencer for granted. Our community is so fortunate to have a Main Street where every storefront, practically every storefront, there might be one that's empty at this point, but every storefront is full. And not every community in the rural Midwest can say that. And so I don't want to take our Main Street for granted. I don't want to take the hard work that people do to enhance our Main Street for granted. It's a team effort. It's certainly not just the city doing it. It's a lot of people pulling together. Another event that was kind of a fun event was the opening of the rocket slide, and that in East Leach Park. And I really want to thank and congratulate all of those who raised money for the restoration of this Spencer icon. And I think that many future generations will continue to enjoy the rocket slide, and it's due to the efforts of a lot of folks. A couple of events, and may not be as fun as the rocket slide, obviously, and it's unfortunate that one of these, we had an active shooter drill at the high school in August, and it's unfortunate that this is part of our existence. But we can watch the news, and it seems like several times during the year, these active shooter drills come, that the practice comes to fruition. And I think that it was a good collaborative effort. We had the PD was involved, the Sheriff's Department, the hospital, the school obviously was involved. And as I was not at the event, but I was at the debriefing. And it was very gratifying to me to see what the takeaways from the various groups were with regard to that particular drill. And there were three things that they said. Number one was competence. They were impressed with the competence that each individual segment had in that particular area. And then they were talking about teamwork and the teamwork that it took, and they worked seamlessly together. And they also talked about training, that this was vital, that this kind of training is vital to performing under pressure. And the next step, and this was kind of interesting, I thought, well, where do we go from here? And what they said was, we need more training. And I think that will enhance their teamwork, and it will enhance their competence as well. And then lastly, what I want to touch on with regard to events is we held a disaster plan simulation here at City Hall in the event that there would be, and the simulation dealt with a tornado that, that hit the community. It was set up by Clay County Emergency Management Manager Eric Tigas. He did a wonderful job guiding us through this particular disaster scenario. The biggest takeaway for me from that simulation was the professionalism of our city department heads. I cannot tell you how impressed I was with their professionalism. They were very, very good and really stepped up to the plate in every situation during that simulation. The biggest need we have, and you know, you don't go through these and think, well, we're just perfect. No, we are not perfect. We have some work to do with our disaster planning. And right now, the biggest hole that we have and that we identified as a group is how to coordinate volunteers. Because if you think about it, you're going to have, if there's a tornado that hits a segment of town, you're going to have people that want to help. They're going to want to bring water. They're going to want to help take branches down. They're going to want to help their neighbors. But you have to coordinate that effort so that people are not getting in the way of the actual first responders. So that's a plan that we're working on. We plan to have another simulation probably this spring sometime, and hopefully we'll be able to put that coordination of the volunteers piece into this as well. Okay, lastly, what I'd like to deal with for a little bit is the goals that the community, or the city council I should say, kind of came up with in February when we had our goal setting session. And we basically came up with 3 primary goals, and there were several secondary goals. I'm not going to go into those today, but the 3 primary goals, the first one was the development of the North Y area. And I have to give a lot of credit to Councilman Lauren Reed for spearheading this effort, as well as Dan Gifford, our city manager. But the city, during the past year, purchased 44 acres along the Highway 71 corridor, and we are in the process of developing plans for the infrastructure, sewer, and street development to move out there. And we believe that this is going to be something that is going to be a benefit to the community for decades to come, and that this will be a catalyst for economic development in the city of Spencer. And again, you may not see something happen next month or in 2 months or 6 months, but the stage is being set for that development to occur. Also, and not necessarily the North Y project, but something that the city did along Highway 71, and that is purchase 5 acres of land north of Schoenemans. And we are planning on looking at putting in infrastructure there, and that's a prime location for development, but it will also provide access to 4th Avenue West and perhaps open up that area to the west of Highway 71. Another goal was to develop a plan for the 100 acres. That 100 acres is south of the sheriff's office off of 4th Street. The one thing I think that we have gotten done out there is we have put in storm sewer, and that accesses the new homes that are being developed on the other side of the Beltway. But that storm sewer is there, and it can, it has now the possibility of being able to go further south. There's a sign out there, but there hasn't been much progress to report, and hopefully, I'm here to report. I'm just going to tell you the facts, and we need to move forward on this, and we need to get this going. But the stage is set again, and it's ready for development. And then the third goal was development of improvements in the Spencer swimming pool, relocation of the campground, and the splash pad. I've already touched on the splash pad. It seems like there's a lot of momentum throughout the community, actually. People have been talking about this. So I'm confident that we're going to be moving forward on that. The Park Board and Parks Committee have been meeting quite a bit in the past last 12 months to look at these issues. We'll be hiring a consultant, I believe, here in the very near future to look at further improvements on the swimming pool. And we've talked to the engineering folks who put together the master plan for the parks. There was a meeting with them, I believe it was in October, to talk about the campground and to talk about the concerns that some of the citizens in that particular area by the campground had if it were to move. So those are the goals. That's a little brief update on where we are on those goals. So that basically wraps up a very busy year in Spencer. And I'd like to close with a quote that I used at the January update, the first mayor's update that I did. And it comes from a former mayor, Kenan Bresnan from Indianola. And he had this to say about civil discourse, with there being much more contentiousness with regard to public meetings, school board meetings, city council meetings, and so forth. And you know, a lot of those kind of meetings, and it's not just in the Midwest, it's all over the country, have been disrupted. A lot of shouting, a lot of incivility, just downright rudeness, in my opinion. Fortunately, we in Spencer have not seen this, and I hope we don't. Mayor Bresnan said this: "Civility is respect for others that requires time, presence, willingness to engage in genuine discourse, and the intention to seek common ground." And I've always said that I believe we may not always agree, but we can disagree with honor and dignity. And with that, I want to wish you and your family a very happy new year. And with that, I'll close with take care and do good. That was a long one. I know.